that goes in there and beats the hell out of a bag and then leaves. And so that's been like the kickboxing has really saved me through this. It's also during the process, it's like the 1 hour of the day as this was going on where my phone's off and because I'm so much in my body, I just don't have the opportunity to think about mental things. And so just having like the gap is keeping me really sane, kind of like a pattern interrupter. So that's been awesome. So yeah, I get out of kickboxing, everything sucks still. Yeah, and I think it was maybe, David's not here yet, David Block, who we're giving a talk. It's a little zappy. Something's not grounded over here. David Block, who's not here yet. The other thing that was super helpful was that I have really amazing friends that like, I didn't want anybody to know when it first happened. Like I think it got leaked because my neighbor like posted images on his Facebook, and by then, before I knew it, people were calling me. Because I realized it was like too big to hide, but I didn't want to flex it either. I still didn't know what I was going to do with myself or the situation. And then, I don't know, Martha, who brought up the fundraiser idea? David? Yeah, so David came on because like I've never done a fundraiser before. Part of the thing that what this sort of uncovered was I was a person, I've been going to Burning Man for 20 years, and so I took, I took radical self-reliance like to the letter, and I had created a scaffolding around my life that really facilitated the experience of never wanting to ask anybody for help and never needing help. And I knew that was there, but I really didn't sometimes it's like you get into these patterns and these routines. And my therapist and I have talked a lot about, there's like these different, he practices kind of the, I don't know what you call, like, he's a very intuitive therapist, but they talked about there's different levels of self. There's a core self, and then there's a reactive self that you sort of create around the core self, and then there's there's the other self that is the self you sort of project to the world, and it's like who you are within that context. So we operate with these different types of selves. And I remember I saw my therapist the day, was it the next day? It was Thursday, right? Because it happened on a Wednesday. I saw my therapist on a Friday, and I just started seeing him a few months. And I was even like weeks ahead of that. I'm like, Martha was the one that encouraged me to go to therapy, and I'm like, babe, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not getting any breakthroughs with this guy. We're just like talking about you and things that are going on. Like, I considered my therapy sessions with him like mental flossing. Like, I just don't want to get any cavities, but like, I'm pretty good, like, I'm successful, I've got a barn, I've got kids, my wife loves me almost all the time. She loves me all the time. It's like, mission accomplished. Like, what's left to uncover, just like, don't fuck up. Don't get canceled, just stay away from the liabilities. That's where I was before this, and then that day where I had the session with him, it was an early morning session, and I don't know what, maybe it was just some comments people, I don't know what, I know a lot was going on, but I remember just like, he opened the door, and I stumbled into his office, like onto the couch, like just bawling my eyes out. And I could tell at that moment, or maybe, well, I was too obsessed with crying to notice his reaction. In retrospect, his reaction was like, I finally have something to work with. Like, he was so excited about that, in the best way. He was excited about that. the one note that I took for this, because I'm trying to come up with what are things that I haven't said in like past interviews. What leads into this and what I uncovered in this 1 hour long session with my therapist. And like, yeah, that's the craziest thing, is that like sometimes, and I don't know how many people go to therapy. Gabor Mate talks about trauma, and that trauma, it's not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. And so you can't control, you can't turn back, I can't ever make the barn not burn, like that happened. But it's what happens inside of me based off the barn burning that I'm in control of. Like I have agency over that thing. But I think so many of us, especially when we experience traumas, when we're younger or in the past, it's hard to make that sort of separation. And the point that I wrote down here is sometimes the hardest part of healing is finding where the wound is. And I think that's different for everybody, and how we record those wounds. Like I had a lot of trauma when I was younger because I had a really significant brain operation, like got a big mean scar that goes across here and that peeled my face off, and it was a big thing, but it was a big, scary, horrible, painful, terrible thing that happened. But for me, like I also have aphantasia, so I don't create mental memories. I don't have a mental imagination, so I get over things really well, because I can also bury things really quickly. There's no Rolodex. Part of what made the barn so valuable is because I don't have a mental library of memories or things, I'm a very sentimental guy, and the barn was like it was like a Bennigan's of just like memory flare, like everywhere, over like every wall, like photos of our crew from Burning Man, because I don't like drawers or where tools go to die. I just like having everything right where I can like see it all the time. And so I feel like there's lots of my past and wounds that have been there, but because they're not really front and center in my life, I was really able to bury them. But I was instantly put in a situation where, after I kind of talked to my therapist about like, here's what's happening right now. I realized that like the work that I needed was like, I'm so screwed, just having 3 kids is a lot. It's a lot, they keep us up at night, literally and figuratively. I'm there. Suicide is not an option at kid number 1. Kid number 3, you're all in on this life game, and I worked so hard to try to create a foundation and a structure for that. I mean, the paintings and the artwork that I was hoarding were like, it was their inheritance. Everything I had was wrapped up. All the strategies I had for protecting them were in this thing that does not exist anymore. And the tools I have to support myself from my family don't exist either. And I have my family, I've got a team, an amazing team, and all these people that count on me as like the rainmaker, and I'm in a smoldering pile of ash. There's like no rain at all. And so I knew that I had to, like, asking for help was something that there wasn't really any. It was like the nuclear option, but like it was Armageddon. Like there wasn't. I knew I had to do this, and I knew that just the idea of it was just something about it to me was just repulsive, and I could see that like there's this huge fear around having to ask for help. And so that was what I talked to my therapist about. I'm like, why? Like, what happened? Like, asking, we all need help. Everybody needs help. And when you help people, it feels good. It feels good to help people. And he told me the first thing is like, actually, it's like giving, allowing someone to give is a gift. And I'm like, well, I'm such a transactional person. Like, what do I give in return? And he's like, all you have to do is give like your vulnerability. He's like, when you came in my office crying, he's like, that's the best gift you could have given me, And like, that concept did not exist in my mind, like that wasn't something I was familiar with at all. And so I was like, okay, well that makes sense, like there's it seems like I get what you're saying, gifting, like still, like what is this thing? And I mean, it was like a half hour of me just sort of like thinking back, because a lot of times, you know, I mean, that's the one thing, it's like we've all got trauma. I mean, our first experience on this planet, trauma. You know, how were you born? I mean, based off the way you were born, I can make a pretty educated guess to what kind of trauma you're dealing with the rest of your life. Like if you were a C-section, for me, I got pulled off with tongs on drugs, so avoidant, day one, you know? It's like the first thing, our intro to this world, unless you practice home birth, which I fully support home birthing, I think. Big ups to the home birthing community, you know? That's the only way you get into this birth without trauma. Most of us were not that fortunate. And the trauma, it just snowballs and kind of like accrues throughout our life. You know, I mean, how old were you guys when you even realized you had to do something about trauma? I thought trauma was just like, that's just part of the game that we're in. But with, you know, just a little bit of prompting, going back into my memories, I realized that like when I had my big trauma of a crazy near-death experience, kind of alien abduction as a kid, it was the attention that disaster drew to me and the people that came to me trying to help. The experience I had with the people that would visit me in the hospital, like keep in mind, like this event like completely disfigured my face. So swollen, shaved head, chunk of skull missing, massive. I remember seeing the way children and friends of mine in school and parents looked at me, and just the repulsion that they had, and like that 11-year-old in that moment, fuck this, and being at the center of pity of other people and any energy that they gave me, I turned that into a negative. And that was, I'm sure there's a lot more, we've only done a few sessions around it, but like that, it was this thing. They say part of what trauma does is I think the scars of trauma is that it disconnects you from your authentic self, like the core you, like the you without armor, the you without context, the you without like a self-reference. It gets you farther and farther away. And I think that experience, it just sort of, my boat just slightly drifted away from an authentic version of me that knew how to give and receive love in a way where it felt good to be vulnerable. Like in that moment, I never wanted to be vulnerable to anybody else ever again. And it's that trauma that took me away from my authentic self. And so now I'm navigating life in a way that isn't authentic, but you know, I'm 11 years old and I don't care about being authentic. Like I'm just in this thing to survive and try to I'm scrambling to try to make meaning out of a world that like does not make sense to me anymore. Like I was going to Catholic school at the time. Nothing in Catholic school told me that you could just die at any moment for a random reason and get disfigured without like any explanation. And so I kind of like just stopped. I think I kind of just stopped believing in everything and all the stories people told me. And the world was so inhospitable and terrifying that like the world that I could make up in my sketchbook was the world that, it wasn't a solution, but it just felt safer. And the more time being alone felt safe. And drawing is an excellent way of being by yourself. One of the best ways of having a good reason to be by yourself. And so, man, even this, unless I'm just super electric, this chair is a little shocking right now too. And like I think that's what really started it. That's what, you know, I didn't choose art as a profession because I wanted to blow people's minds or heal people or amaze people. Like I got into it just because I was trying to figure out like why to stick around for another day. You know, it was like getting good at art was like a small carrot, but it was like the only carrot that I could have to just keep me going. And then you do that for 11, you do that for 4 years, and then I find like marijuana and acid at 15 and 16, and that's another great excuse to spend time by yourself. And turns out, spending time by yourself on drugs, drawing, career, set, game, point, match. And it worked. You know, it was a great strategy, and it was a great for someone that doesn't want to be vulnerable and doesn't want to ask for help and is pretty freaked out about people. But one of the lessons that I've learned here too is that, man, art as an artist, and how many artists do we have in the crowd? A lot of them. Great. What I had discovered that in that week leading up, which is something that I don't think it ever would have became clear to me, was just like how being an artist, it's really like none of these things I developed were really premeditated, but I realized that, you know, here I'm able to put my energy, my life force, my conscience, my thoughts into this object that's removed from me. It's a part of me, but it's not me. And you know, I think a lot of artists, like I'm a gifts of appreciation. You can give this thing to someone as an act of love. You know, so it's a way of exchanging love but you can do it totally indirectly. And you can put this art out there, and people can love the art, and you can receive like a part of that. You can harvest that love without ever being vulnerable enough to be rejected. And as an artist, like one of the reasons that me and a lot of my other friends, we work so hard at making our art so awesome is because we want it to be impossible to reject. You might not like it might not be like your cup of tea, but it's badass. You have to recognize that like there's skill and there's time and there's concentration and the colors look cool and the composition's there and the figures don't look wonky. You know, you do all of this just because you don't want to get rejected. And for me, like I said, not consciously, but like that's how like I got to put all this love out in the world and then receive all the love from the art indirectly without even like, I can do this without eye contact or a handshake, you know, and from like an introverted, scared dude that likes being by himself. What a perfect like so brilliant, honestly. I mean, I don't mean to like toot my own trauma here, but like fucking slick, you know, like really cool the way that works, you know. And I guess like what my therapist finds this whole thing so fascinating. Every session we have is pretty awesome from here on out. Something that he recognized that was pretty wild, and that's another thing too. So I get to this point of like, now I realize like, oh, like asking for help. You know, this 11-year-old boy was the one that decided he didn't want to ask for help. And like, I'm not that 11-year-old boy, and I've got a family of future 11-year-olds, and like, I don't have the luxury of not asking for help. I don't have anything to lose anymore because everything is gone. And I had great friends like David, you know, who else? You guys like, anybody like Union, the image of Union? Brian Franklin and Jennifer Russell, the two models of Union, they were one of the first people that came out and reached out and helped with like the design of the fundraiser. And you know, because it had been so foreign to me. But so we do this, and based off my therapist's advice, where he was just like, all you need to do now, he's like, your main job is to cry and just be vulnerable with people, which was such a new thing. And you know, like on these videos that me and my wife made, like a lot of them I recorded by myself, and I'd like practice most of them like 10 times before I'd like say like Kickstarter, or I'd say like the wrong fundraiser platform. I'd like kind of make it over and over, you know, try to capture that vulnerability. And it's interesting because a reflection I've gotten from a lot of my friends were like, man, like Andrew, like you're so brave. You're so brave for what you're doing. And like, or people are like, you handle everything so well, you know? And it's funny, like, I realize that we live in a world of infinite possibilities, and I'm sure I could have done things a lot of different, but like, the trauma of seeing your life and all of your dreams erupt in a deadly explosion of force. My wife liked to say, what is it, fire? If you want to get rid of something, you put it in the water, but when you put it in fire, whatever you burn in a fire is alive in every fire. I tell that to myself whenever like I see fire, like driving out here on the road, and get like PTSD immediately. Smokestacks, PTSD every time I see those. Still working on that. But nobody puts something in a fire, like it lives in every fire. And yeah, I guess it's just the thing where where my therapist is really excited about this is just the relationship, like, I don't know what you call it, like just like this like the causality and the loop of this sort of a trauma. Like here I am, I'm gonna try to bring all of these separate pieces together. I'm at my lowest low because not only is all my stuff gone, but like the factory that created my main evolutionary cultural strategy for surviving and thriving on this planet, all the things that it's like the Fort Knox of my crystallized love that I was counting on for the next few decades at least of putting it out there is gone. My main strategy for giving and receiving love is gone. All the tools for giving and making these things to give and receive love are gone, and all the things are gone. And so to be at the lowest point, and that trauma is so harsh and it's so immediate that something about that, I think that loss just like cauterized some type of wound, and so it immediately put me into this place of my authentic self because I had nowhere else to go. You know, there wasn't anywhere to retreat. Like all this, like I said, like all the tricks I had, my whole bag of tricks were gone, and I'm here just like naked and empty. And you know, like none of the decisions I made felt brave. They might have felt desperate, but it wasn't brave because the idea of not showing up and doing whatever I could to support my family wasn't. I'm a provider too, so that was not an option. And so to go from these first few just days of just like the anguish and the sorrow, then to this realization of like, okay, wow, so this also, you know, what's keeping me from moving forward or healing or even just surviving this trauma are decisions I made from a previous trauma, like 30 years earlier. And just like the relationship of how one trauma can disconnect you with an authentic self, and then later on another trauma can like reconnect you to your authentic self. And that's some transpersonal voodoo stuff, man. Like that's wild that it works like that, you know? And so to then be at this like this super low, and then we launched this fundraiser, and it's like, I mean, you know, I go to these events, I get backstage all the time, like people give me high fives, like I know like I have, like there's people out there, but like, I had no idea how much you guys love me. Like I wasn't I wasn't even in the neighborhood of understanding that before this, you know? And yeah, to be there without all the things that, all the tools that I was using to give and receive love in a really safe, guarded, unvulnerable way, and then to lose that and have that be the thing that makes me realize how loved that I really was. And it was all those things, all that art and all that tools, all that fear. I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of fear about the future. where we're going, what's happening in the world. It's funny, the day before this happened, Martha and I, we always talk about, like, man, do we leave America? We go to Costa Rica, you know, we go to New Zealand, like, where do we go? And I was saying that the one nice thing about living in America is that every day you're in America, you know that that's the best day America has, and it's never getting any better than that. Facts, straight facts. Enjoy while you can, people. Every day, a little bit, yeah, so dramatic for me. And yeah, before this happened, I thought AI art was like the biggest existential threat to my legacy. And spoiler alert. But yeah, just like such a, I really do think it's like, I mean, I would have been, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still get like, I have dreams that I like find boxes of sketchbooks and things all the time. They like kind of taunt me. But it's as far as like overall life, you know, what this life is about. You know, the other, I think, the other, maybe a lesson from the flame I've realized too, my friend Zavi, who got his workshop studio, he lost that in an Ashland fire a few years ago, and he told me, he's like, congratulations, Andrew, we both won Buddhist merit badges that we didn't ask for. And there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of understanding and permanence and like what that means. Just because so much, all the energy I put into like my, you know, I'm not a doomer, but I'm an like apocalyptimist, and you know, I'm a protector. I have things that I would use to protect my family. You know, lots of big dangerous things to protect family. Lots of food in case we need it. Lots of, you know, like all this energy I put into trying to be. I was really aware of wildland fires because I thought that was going to take the barn, was a fire encroaching. So I had trash pumps. I've been trying to convince my wife to let me buy a fire truck for like 3 years. Yeah, I've got like 75 fire. All my firefighting gear was in the barn. You know, so it's like. Wah, 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 wah. There's this metaphor that I've been thinking. It's so funny. I've had this metaphor for years. This is exclusive Envision content. I haven't said this in any of my previous podcasts. You guys ever remember the game Galaga? Anybody play Galaga? So for those that haven't played it, you're like, it's a 2D 25-cent arcade game, and you're like a little white ship, and you move. You just have like one x-axis, you move back and forth, and you shoot like invading insectoid ships. It sounds a lot more interesting than the graphics are, and they come down. But there's this component in the game where as you're playing, and if you let one of like, kind of like the moth purple mantis-y guys hypnotize you, you lose your ship, but then you can get the ship back, and then you've got 2 ships, and you've got double firepower. And like, that's the move. But it's just like, I've always felt that was like such a metaphor for life, you know? It's like we try to build, and when you have these 2 ships, you're twice as powerful, and you're like crushing twice as many things, but you're twice as vulnerable at the same time. And you don't win Galaga. There's no winning Galaga. There's no like final boss. There's no end credits. You just play till you lose. And so I feel like in a lot of life, maybe unconsciously, I was playing this game against entropy, or against just my own mortality, by putting myself into things that would outlive me, you know? Like maybe it was just a way of maybe I was just humoring myself by doing this. I don't know what it is, but I feel that in a lot of ways, like, what this did make me realize is that like eventually there's a 100% probability that everything we do goes away. Nothing lasts. Like on a long enough timeline, nothing's here anymore. And it feels like, I mean, part of the jeu de vivre, like what makes life interesting is the friction and the struggle that we're all involved with against entropy. Like, we know it's all going away, but it's not going away today. You know, fuck you, death, like, not today. Like, today is our day. So there's something about that fight. But if you think it's a fight you're ever going to win, then you lose. You know, I feel like this has forced me to really pivot from that whole perspective and realizing that, you know, we don't fight to win. The winning is that we just keep fighting. That we don't give up. The losing is peace. And it's not losing, but if you want peace, peace is ready for you at any moment. Peace is always an option. Giving up is always an option. But joy, the friction and the struggle is the joy. And you know, this helped me realize that, like realize where the fight is, and realize that there's a lot of fight left. I can see it in your eyes too. There's a lot of fight left in you guys too. You know, we're not giving up, and to come from a place of just feeling the most ultimate. I felt like I felt like game over, like I had lost, to 2 days later to launching this fundraiser and having just being more overwhelmed. Like it's like the Grinch stole Christmas. Like my heart didn't know it could get that big with all the love coming in, and to realize that I was so. It's just so ironic. You lose all the things that you think make you safe and protected. And once you lose them, you feel more safe and more held and more loved and more part of a thing that's bigger than you. You know, I've always been grateful that I have the ability to contribute to this scene. You know, I remember being at the very first Envision that there was. I'm very, very grateful to be slowly turning into a relic of festival history. You know, and I've always loved giving things to you guys, and making things. It's so ironic that, like, you know, Samskara, you know, this is my Samskar. You know, the barn is like my new. It was Shiva Ratri a few weeks ago, and if there's any Shivites in the crowd, and my buddy Fong, who's one of my partners, and he spent a lot of time in the barn too. And I used to have this huge altar of Shiva in the barn. And I mean, the barn burns so white hot, like it's hard to find anything there that isn't like solid, thick steel. And Fong, he has a funny voice too. He was like, I was looking in your corner for an artifact of Shiva. And I was like, yeah, I was looking there too. I was trying to find something. And then I realized it's all an artifact of Shiva. It's only funny if you know his voice. It's true though, you know, like this is like what a big Shivite lesson. And so there's all these stages of grief. Kickboxing helps with like the anger and the guilt. And but it's really weird. It's like the first week was just so intense. I mean, it was like bipolar emotion. Like to go from so low to so high, it was just like an emotional trauma, joy, orgasm, whiplash. And like, you know, what's enlivened me now, and now it's like things have started, like the adrenaline's gone down. You know, I think my wife, my family, we're just trying to like kind of find the new normal, make good decisions. But it's really helped in just making us see, like, you know, sometimes you have too much stuff that gets in the way of making you realize like what's really valuable in your life, and how like sometimes the greatest commodity, the greatest assets we have, like are our relationships and our friends. You know, the things that saved me were the things that were impossible to burn. You know, things that I had been accruing without even consciously recognizing that I was doing that over the years. You know, because it's like when we talk about like the vulnerability component, you know, a lot of comments I've read so many. I'm so invulnerable that like I don't even handle my social media. I can't even. I'm too fragile to like read comments. And the thing I just like is we have to do this right now. My goal of like being successful has always been the day we don't need social media. That's when you're really successful. When you can just like torch all of that. But just reading all the comments and having people be like, you know, like some of the ones that really stuck out were people just like, I feel like I've been a fan for so long, but I've never seen you before. because I thought that letting myself be seen was a liability, because it was working well enough. The machine was working without you seeing me or me being vulnerable, so we could have just kept it in that gear and just moved forward and not screwed up, But yeah, not anymore.
We're happy to see more of you.
I'm happy to be seen. I'm happy to not be afraid to be seen anymore, and realize that like the things I thought that I was afraid of were also kind of phantoms too, because it was like the irrational fear of an 11-year-old that was perpetuating that. It wasn't like an authentic version of myself. Yeah, I'm happy to feel this open. I'm starting to feel more things in my body. We took our kids to that little bridge with the crocodiles, and you want to feel something in your body, like watch your 6 and your 4 and your 1-year-old like dangling on the edge with like man-eating reptiles. I felt it like right here, like right in my groins, like that's what my therapist means in feeling it in your body. I felt that in my body. That's right there. I got it. I'll work my way up from there. Yeah. I don't know. This feels good. It feels good. It feels good to be here. It feels good not to carry the fear of being seen. It seems so tragic to have gone. If there was another timeline where if the barn hadn't had burned, and I'm part of the bartering stage, but I'm pretty convinced that the barn was like almost inevitable. It kind of makes sense. I had this irrational fear around it burning because I could just sense that it was going to happen at some point in time. Like it feels like this is definitely just part of causality. But despite not having all the things, it's really tragic thinking that I could have gone the rest of my life without knowing that I was loved and that I had this much love. And it's the kind of thing where it's like I figure the reason you guys do love me or love the art is that despite not wanting to be vulnerable in person, the artwork I create is super vulnerable. I get super high and make this stuff. Irresponsibly high on multiple things. Recklessly high. To go to the deepest parts of myself, to figure these things out, to hopefully come out and crystallize it before the high wears off, to give you guys these transmissions. I've been doing that for a really long time. But what's really interesting, all the medicines, all the acid, all the ayahuasca, all the purging, it took fire to break through, All respect to the medicines, but sometimes it's the elements are around us all the time. I don't know. Vibe check. What's our vibe check? What's our time check? I could just give a rambling. We're at 4. Is it go till 4? What's on the schedule? 4. Okay. Anything else, my lovely, beautiful Martha? Anything I'm forgetting? Things? Thank you so much. Thank you. This is totally new, like the eye contact thing. It's I have my training wheels on. Sorry if I don't do it right. I've been really avoiding it for decades, but like eye contact, it's like pretty cool. Really cool transmission. So yeah. Oh, okay. There's nobody coming after me, so we can take all the time we want. I'm not going anywhere. We got a nanny. Huh? Oh, we have a meeting at 4. We have some questions, comments, concerns, lovely people.